This is BBC News. I'm Carrie Gracie. The headlines at 9. Scientists warn contact tracing in the UK is not good enough to prevent a second, even bigger wave of COVID-19 once schools reopen for the new term. Government says it's improving.
But this is not something we've ever had to do before. And
Bill Gates' predictions are going very well then.
Don't underestimate what we have achieved.
That crystal ball he's got.
Pupils in Scotland find out what grades
Even bigger second wave.
Force their exams to be
Like he said.
for the first
Oh,
time.
they will take note next time.
I got exactly what I was hoping for, so it means I'm going to university.
Anyone says that about Gates are world conspiracy theorists.
The oil company BP announces record losses and
Seems to be predicting everything right though, doesn't he?
pandemic sent demand
Like the news he just said.
challenging. The Australian state of Victoria
Tesla Trace ain't going to be able to stop it. An even bigger second
and
wave.
deploys more military personnel to fight the spread of the virus.
What they've been ramming us with
in the past week,
for the past 2 months.
the windows of people in cars and
Second
pull them
wave.
over there so they could provide their details because they weren't telling us where they were going.
And a rallying cry for the future. England footballer Marcus Rashford and model Adwoa Aboah feature on the cover of British Vogue's activist-themed issue, The Faces of Hope.
Faces of hope. I can give you a whole list of faces of hope off YouTube, fighting for fucking truth for what's going on with this bogus COVID.
Good morning, welcome to BBC News. Test and trace programmes in the UK are not good enough to stop a second wave of coronavirus after September when children go back to school. That's according to scientists. The study, published today...
There's no one on this earth who can predict a second wave.
Would increase
That shows you.
go back to work
It's orchestrated.
and are needed at home to look after their children. Scientists say there could be a second wave of the virus twice as big as the first peak.
Not only they're predicting a second wave,
well, in Scotland,
but predicting it's going to be twice as big.
On the 11th of August and across
When's that? When they get the vaccine?
In early September. The study's mathematical model found a second wave could be prevented by scaling up the track and trace system so that more people with
Threatening us all now.
contacts are found. In a moment, we'll speak to the author.
Scale it all up.
First, though, our correspondent
Come down on your own.
has this report.
Experts agree
To prevent the second wave.
return to school for both their well-being and the economy. By the start of next term, some will have been away from the classroom for almost 6 months.
Not our fault, government have done it.
By University College London and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine suggests the UK's test, trace and isolate system isn't working well enough for this to happen safely, as it isn't finding and isolating enough contacts of people confirmed to have the virus.
They are. In other words, we need to clamp down on everyone. People aren't complying to contact and trace.
More than twice the size of the first. This is because schools reopening goes hand in hand with more parents going back to work and other lockdown measures.
They're taking the piss, this government, big
The
time.
government says plans have been put in place to ensure schools can reopen safely. Laura Foster, BBC News.
All schools can open safely, because there is nothing.
Government Minister Simon Clarke defended England's track and trace system.
it continues to improve day by day, week by week. As I say, we've now made sure that 184,000 people who would otherwise have been out there in society potentially posing a risk to others have been
130,000 morons what have played a part in it.
We reach 80% of people who test positive, over 80%, and over 3/4 of their close contacts. So that is impressive. That's great work, and we should reflect on the fact that genuinely is a massive step forward compared to where we were a few weeks ago.
You can't believe, can you? I can't believe listening.
To learn the lessons as we go in terms of how you can most effectively reach.
I'm listening to this bullshit based on a bogus fucking virus.
And there is always more to learn about the best time of day to try and call these people, the potential for physical.
The only pandemic, like I say, is coming through your TV. You're seeing nothing out there. Nothing. No one knows fucking shit about it.
The Lancet are absolutely right.
Apart from everyone being daft wearing the masks.
What we have achieved here.
They're shitting themselves walking away from you.
Let's talk now to Dr.
When you go in the shop, dodging you down next aisle.
Fellow and lecturer in mathematical modelling at University.
There's nothing going on out there.
Author of the new study. Thank you so much for joining us. You obviously have to make some critical assumptions, both about children transmitting the infection.
Children transmit a flu every year when they get the jab or the fucking nasal spray.
The assumptions on which the report is based.
I will. Just before I answer, I think it's imperative, and we find it incredibly important that schools need to go back as soon as possible. We studied.
Without all the draconian measures,
the concept of reopening the
treating kids like guinea pigs,
and allowing
child abuse.
Social mixing within the community. So, because we think this is important to do
We have a service called social services. What's supposed to protect children from child abuse.
Together, and as
but they won't step up to the plate for none of that.
Back to school. So on that basis, what
shows how fake they are
about the risks of a second wave.
Our findings suggest that we can avoid a second pandemic wave if schools reopen alongside society reopen.
We can't avoid a second wave because if government want to orchestrate it, they'll orchestrate it. Simple as, like they orchestrated the first one. But we're living in now. It's all a phony show.
Now, obviously, we just heard from a government minister setting out what they are doing and his
and I'm fucking sick of it.
To ramp up the testing and the tracing.
When you think about it, folks, they've took away a year of our lives
is not good enough to avoid
based on bullshit.
I think it's important to notice the important job that
might be even more yet, depending on how long this goes on for.
And the fact that we have developed that at the onset of the pandemic. What our studies are suggesting is that we need to scale up testing of symptomatic people and have a certain level of contact tracing of their contacts in order to avoid the second pandemic wave. And we are the first study that has quantified the numbers of where we need to get with the testing level and the tracing level in order to avoid a second pandemic wave in the UK.
So just to be clear, on their current performance, you think there will be a second wave when, several months after schools reopen, and you think that second wave will be worse than the first wave?
Bill Gates has already said it. Everything they're saying, Bill Gates has said. It's all scripted. He even smiled when he said it.
In terms of contact tracing,
oh, they will listen next time.
There is definitely
they will take note next time.
The contacts are being traced of those being positive.
You can say it like that with a smarmy look on your face. In other words, I know what's coming.
They test and trace and isolate data with the week ending of 22nd of July.
You know it's all an orchestration.
Look at the number of people that are being tested positive, how many of their contacts are being traced, and we come to a rough calculation of around 50% of contact of those being positive.
Contact and trace, track and trace.
So this is the contact tracing component. That
it's all against your human rights.
Figures. There is a
mind you, what rights have you got now?
And
it's being eroded as we speak.
Do you have policy recommendations other than this? Do you, for example, say, as we've heard some scientists saying at the weekend, if we're going to reopen schools, we may need to make some trade-offs. We may need to close some
trade-offs.
Like pubs.
I think it's important.
Fucking hell, man! This is hyping up. I heard this yesterday. And she's just said it. You can see this happening. Threatening pubs. They want pub closures. Stop everyone meeting. That's what this is all about. There is no trade-off. They try and shut pubs.
Reopening of schools and how we can avoid a second wave with reopening of schools alongside society.
Threatening shut the pubs. They want pub closures.
Thank you for having me.
Well, joining us now is David.
She's just said it. She's scripted. Everything these people say is a script.
Welcome to
that bitch there.
How do you do?
Well, thank you. I know you are well across all these issues. What's your assessment of the risks of a second wave in the UK several months after the reopening of schools?
Oh, they're hyping up the second wave.
Look at what's happening around the world.
The main agenda right now. Push the second wave.
Is just a constant presence and is returning.
Fear.
Sometimes I actually avoid the term second wave and instead refer to constant spikes and
occasional surges, because I think
There is no spikes and there is no surges.
Now these spikes will be...
They're all invention by these deep state sick people
suddenly, and
who are running the show.
We should be able, using the test, trace and isolate routine, to be able to minimise those as quickly as possible. And that's why I think the work that's been done by the
utter bollocks.
representative you just interviewed...
Why am I in fear of this fucking virus then? Because I'm not.
How necessary it is to...
I was asked the other day by somebody I know who lives locally. She said she's terrified. She said, aren't you? I said, no. I said, I don't give a shit. I'm not terrified of it one single bit. So it depends what you understand about it.
Frustrating for everybody, because I think most would just like to get on with their lives as best they could, but we are going to have surges of disease, and even when we got the numbers very
surges of disease? What disease? People like you, what are the fucking disease?
I believe that
coming on TV, fucking spreading your disease of lies.
From time to time,
that's a fucking disease.
Interrupted. Businesses may have to be closed for a period. Schools may have to be stopping for a period, which will be really awful for the pupils and the parents, because there's a spike building up.
I agree with stopping schools anyway. What's the point in sending your kids into these fucking prison camp schools?
Having strong defense,
that's what they are now.
Reacting quickly, preventing transmission through best behaviour, and that will be important. We mustn't cut any corners.
All doors are locked up, trapping your kids in the schools. Bollocks for the fucking safety.
Where is best practice?
CCTV'd up, all fences have been erected all around schools.
We've seen countries in East Asia do remarkably well. I'd like to...
None of that when I was there.
Singapore, South Korea. I'd also like to pick out China. I'd like to focus on Vietnam. All these are countries that really did give the dealing with this virus very high priority. They said, this is dangerous and we're going to take it seriously. There was no ambiguity ever from the head of government, just we'll deal with it. And the people, they knew about it. And that's all because in 2003, they had a really bad coronavirus outbreak called SARS. And they went through some very tough times. And so they learned...
Yeah, that was likely fucking bogus as well.
All these countries in East Asia are showing us that you still do get spikes and surges. The virus doesn't completely go away.
I haven't forgot fucking seeing some footage years ago saying we need something like a virus to bring about the New World Order, folks. How's about that? We need something like a virus, an outbreak, to establish the New World Order.
If necessary, restricting movement, certainly
and then you get this.
All the cases are identified and that there's a good isolation in place, and then really ensuring that
Event 201,
and that's businesses, local organisations and the like. Similarly, in parts of Europe, we're seeing the same. We're pretty pleased with Germany. And that doesn't mean they've got no
the exercise, Event 201,
get their cases, they respond well.
Based on this exact scenario, what's happening now.
After all, when we were dealing
lo and behold, it happens.
Britain was incredibly helpful.
Oh no, but we're all conspiracy theories for talking about it.
Of isolating people who've got the disease and tracing their contacts. And if we can help other countries do it, I believe we can do it in our own country as well.
Well, just very briefly, you said Britain's going to do really well. When is that going to happen? Because it's not entirely clear to everybody that it's done really well so far, given our death toll and our infection.
See how she's had to fucking bring it all down?
Okay, so,
you just said going do well. Well, she's not really doing well, though, death toll.
Britain's going to do really well because
she just put a fucking right big turd all over his fucking speech, hasn't she?
Attention to where the virus is locally. Secondly, a lot of public...
She loves ramming the fear.
And thirdly, wherever I'm looking now,
as she just had said in her earpiece,
different parts of society
bring him down, bring him down,
and saying we're
keep up the fear, keep up the fear.
The reason, that's because nobody wants to go through further lockdowns. The economy's taken a big hit.
We're in a lockdown now as far as I'm concerned. We ain't out no fucking lockdown.
And that means getting ahead of the virus.
Going for the fucking drinks like having a pint in a fucking mug.
The energy giant BP says it'll cut dividends for its shareholders in half after announcing a record loss as the pandemic sent demand and prices plunging. The group lost more than £5 billion in the 3 months from...
Do you think if the government wouldn't do something about it if they thought it was headed to a total disaster?
Large shareholdings in BP, so let's get the
places going, people, businesses going, jobs being lost.
It's fairly predictable that this was going to be tough. Is it tougher than markets expected?
It's all part of the plan.
Yeah, and what we should be clear here, Carrie, is that
global collapse.
Pension funds that really do rely on that income that is paid through dividends to pay those pensions. They're very used to big oil firms, big energy firms, being able to top up their income through their investments. But what we've heard this morning from BP, just the latest in a long line of energy firms that are finding it really tough right now, reporting that loss, as you said, of $6.7 billion. And that is quite frankly because demand for the stuff it produces, so oil and petrol, has plunged as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. It means that factories weren't using energy to produce things. It means
now it's to hear that they've suffered their losses, isn't it?
Oil and
instead of everyone else getting fucking lost in the pocket.
Using petrol, so all of the things that it makes weren't very much in demand. The price of it fell significantly. Before the pandemic, oil was trading at about $65 a barrel. The average during the pandemic was about 20, 25 and 30. Even, you may remember at one point, prices turning negative. Essentially that when oil firms were saying, we will pay you to take this oil off our hands because we have nowhere to store it. So that is the story for the big energy firms. They're now trying to work out what happens next, when demand might pick up again. We've seen that oil prices have risen somewhat.
It'll pick up when they decide fucking get rid of all this baloney in this bollocks.
Above $55 a barrel. That might
the bogus fucking coronavirus.
At least 2050. So that prompts lots of questions.
I can't see them doing that anytime soon because they're hyping up the second wave.
Focus away maybe from traditional oil and gas towards more renewable.
That's their goal achievement, the next wave.
The environment. But not good news as far as those financial results are concerned. So yet again another big loss.
I won't stop none of this until they achieve
loss at BP.
the New World Order.
It's worth comparing that to Shell. They reported their figures just last week. Their loss was $18 billion. So it puts it into a bit of context. But BP already making clear it's going to have to cut 10,000 jobs around the world. 2,000 of them will be in the UK.
Well, that's a fascinating answer, Ben. I could talk about that, but I just want to pick up on something we just seen on the wires, which is Pizza Express, yet another high street brand. Hospitality obviously struggling now. They're talking about maybe having to shut a lot of restaurants and lose a lot of staff.
Well, Boris Johnson should be fucking buzzing about that, Pizza Express.
We know that the hospitality...
Banging on about us all needing to get fit, haven't we?
Right now, even despite...
Been banging on about that, haven't they, for a few days?
Today, that Eat Out to Help Out scheme.
So an advert last night.
Pizza Express telling us this morning that it will close...
Saying about everyone needs to get fit now and all this business.
With a loss of about 1,100 jobs. Now, as you suggested, not wholly unexpected given the state that many of
so if Pizza Express totally shuts,
for so long, and even now
government should be fucking over the moon, shouldn't they?
With social distancing in place, it means they can't get as many people in those restaurants. They can't
stops everyone getting fucking fat on pizzas.
To be open. And we also know that consumers are feeling pretty nervous about going out right now. So even with those incentives in place, people may be choosing not to eat out in the way that they did before. Pizza Express telling us it's concluded what's known as a CVA. That's basically an agreement with landlords who own those outlets to pay less rent. We've seen it particularly true for high street retailers. Also now in the restaurant sector, they're saying, look, we're earning less money, we need to pay you less money in rent. So as far as those negotiations are concerned, Pizza Express saying 67 restaurants will close. Deals on rents have been agreed with the others, but nonetheless 1,100 jobs could be affected by this. A further blow to an industry that is already struggling and already having to lay off thousands of jobs. And I think it's fair to say this will not be the last. We will see this more as more and more firms now try to...
Everyone just sits back and just doesn't say much about it.
They will be more responsible for more of the salary.
Like this dickhead, he just talks about it, but he's not looking at the wider scale of the impact, is he, what's going on and questioning government. People aren't questioning government, telling them to take the fingers out of their ass, pointing finger at them, no.
It is expected will follow.
Yeah, very very worrying news. Thanks, Ben.
Everyone's just sitting back, listening to it. Oh yeah, no big deal.
Penalties for residents who ignore orders to self-isolate because of coronavirus. Under the new rules, residents are only allowed to shop and exercise within 3 miles of their
Fuck me, what was that then? Show me your papers.
Lockdown breaches have been increased to more than £2,500. Meanwhile, a nighttime curfew has been imposed in the city of Melbourne, and police in Victoria say they'll continue to.
This is fucking draconian. This is.
The law is upheld.
On at least 3 or 4 occasions in the past week,
The law should be upheld. What law?
Cars and pull them out of there
When
so they could provide their
it ain't a proper law because it's been made out of corruption.
Adhering to the Chief Health Officer guidelines,
This is disgraceful.
Their name and their address.
Who would think that something like this would exist on this earth?
Understand. There are consequences
Regardless of
for your
what
actions,
fucking
and
country
if
it's
you're
in.
not doing the right thing, we will not hesitate to issue infringements, to arrest you, to detain you where it's appropriate.
Jesus, what a scumbag he is. I hope hell's waiting for you.
Language and the resistance that he's talking about to these measures.
How can these people talk like this without a fucking
senior members
conscience?
Of the Victorian state government have been infuriated by a minority of people who are determined to flout the regulations.
Government's infuriated by people who continue to flout the freedom.
If you are outside, it is mandatory that you cover your face. We've also heard
Mandatory you cover your face.
And assaulted by people who are flouting the regulations.
Listen to this, oh my, this is what gets to my skin.
A police officer, a female police officer in a shopping centre after being told to wear a mask. So the authorities say that these are so-called sovereign citizens who believe that the law doesn't apply to them. It does.
Fucking too right. Sovereign citizens, that's fucking right.
Breaching those regulations. Also, the military has been knocking on the door.
This will make some of you, your blood boil, some of you people watching this.
Positive to COVID-19 or have been in close contact with someone who has, and about 800 people weren't at home when they should have been self-isolating. So these breaches are causing great concern for a state like Victoria, which is
who is this fucking scumbag?
Spike in coronavirus infections.
So keep an eye on
all these evil bastards are complicit in total, absolute, draconian corruption.
First thing, Matt, what's he doing now?
Hello, Carol. Yeah, not a bad day across some parts of South East England, East Anglia, and the Channel Islands.